Hello, members. Tom Morrison here from Nashville, Tennessee, your home office for the Metal Trading Institute. We're so glad you're here to talk about the Reshoring Initiative, business coming back to the United States from foreign lands, which helps drive jobs and manufacturing. Before we do that, a couple of little tidbits. One, there's a chat box down at the bottom you can click on, and would love for you to, if you have any questions or any comments for Harry or myself during this program, you can chat in there, and I'll be monitoring that, and I can ask that of Harry to give him some answers. So as we get into that, but a couple of big happenings going on in MTI that I like to always make people aware of. So Jobs of Tomorrow, the workforce development project that MTI has been working on since October, is really coming to fruition. We've got 3 of our 26, 22-minute docuseries episodes absolutely complete. I have seen them personally with our team, editing them and working on the scripts, and the final editing is done and they're finalized, and we're working on the last 3. They look dynamic. This is going to be a 6-set docuseries. It's going to give you a chance to get the online version so you can send it to your local trade schools, to your colleges, to your high schools, and empower your employees to send it to friends. That's going to talk about what is heat treating, what technologies are growing in heat treating, and what kind of careers are available that you can jump into. And it all leads to a job portal that's going to drive people to hopefully to your plant to want to work. So labor shortage is a massive issue, and MTI's leadership is stepping into that issue and coming with a great strategy to help drive workers to your plant. So be on the lookout for that. And in the next 2 months or so, we should have the last 3, and we'll have our 6-set of docuseries. And guess where it's going to end up? It's going to end up on UBTV, as well as Amazon Prime streaming freebie channel as well. You can go out there right now and look at last season's Jobs of Tomorrow episodes, which talks about 4 other industries, but heat treating will be there at the end of this year. So exciting stuff on the job front. Second thing is MTI AI. AI is on everybody's mind right now, and it's really taking the world by storm. And the board, the AI task force for the board, actually invested in this past week after a 6-month review in January. We're investing in AI technology that's going to wrap itself around our website and everything there is to know about MTI. And you're going to be able to easily type in, just like you would ChatGPT. It's style technology like that. Type in anything you would like to know or like to talk about, and you're going to get answers back. So we're working on potentially some technical data being there, but it's going to be launching March 1, and you'll be able to go in there and ask anything you want about MTI, and you'll get answers back in a split second. It's great. The third thing and last thing before we jump into reshoring is Furnaces North America 2024. Booths are selling out. We're like 80% sold out right now, and they're going to sell out in the next hopefully 2 to 3 months. You're going to have 160 plus suppliers of everything you can find in heat treating, 35 incredible technical sessions on everything you can imagine is changing, including AI and heat treating. And it's going to be in Columbus, Ohio on October 14th to the 16th. So you're going to want to be there. So make sure to mark on your calendar October 14th, 15th, and 16th, and make plans to come to this. If you miss F&A, you're going to miss everything about the future. Our economists are telling us that we're due for a dip in 2024, and about Q3 and Q4, we're going to see the economy begin to turn and go north. And that show is going to help you find the technology, the processes, and the connections to exhibitors who can help you do your business better to vault you into the future with your company. So big things happening with MTI, and you're a part of it. We're excited. So right now, I want to introduce you, Mr. Harry Moser from the Reshoring Initiative. Harry, welcome to MTI TV.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. You're a great pitch man. You really sell that stuff well. I'm impressed.
It's easy to sell when you have leadership that's doing really cool stuff. You know, I feel like I don't even have to sell it. You just talk. It's like going to the Bahamas or someplace. You don't have to sell Bahamas. People go, I want to go there. Well, our board has been really good about it, unpacking really good solutions to really good pain points of members. So I appreciate hearing that, though. We really love what we do here, and everybody's passionate about MTI. So Harry, tell everybody that's never seen Harry Moser and has never heard you speak or what the Reshoring Initiative. So tell us a little about Harry.
Yeah, so grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City. And the biggest thing in town was Singer sewing machine. They had their main factory for the world there. 120 years ago, it was the largest factory of any kind in the world. 3 million square feet, 5,000 workers. It'd be a big factory today. And my grandfather was a foreman. My dad ran about a third of the factory, including the heat treating department. And I went past 20 years ago, and it's all gone. And as far as I can tell, nothing's made here anymore. And I saw what our city, our state, our country had lost that way to low priced imports. And during my career, I sold machine tools and foundry equipment, and industry after industry I wanted to sell to got wiped out by lower priced imports. And so I said, something has to be done about this. And I founded the Reshoring Initiative after I retired from running machine tool companies and things like that. Our mission is to balance the goods trade deficit, which in 2022 was 1.2 trillion. So it'll take about a 40% increase in US manufacturing to do that, about 5 or 6 million currently non-existing workers that we'll have to get to do that. Okay. And our method of achieving that mission, first we document the trend, because we first so people know what's happening, but surveys have shown that company A is more likely to consider reshoring if it sees that company B and C have done it. So we document it, and then we promote it like we're doing today, getting it out there so people know it's real. And we write 3 or 4 articles a month. Just had an email from Industry Week asking me to write an article on it, in addition to the one they published for me 2 weeks ago. And so we get interviewed all the time. We do about 70 presentations a year. We get lots of attention, get interviewed and so on. And so we document, we promote, we enable. So we have tools that I'll review later on about that will help companies achieve it, help them decide what makes sense to reshore. And then we advocate. So we advocate with the government, for example, to do a much better job on skilled workforce. You were talking about workforce, and that's the biggest single problem we have. You can't increase 40% unless you have a lot more people.
Right.
And you need better people. You need to recruit kids that are some of the best high school students, and then train them really well, the way Germany and Switzerland do with their apprenticeship systems. If I were in charge, I'd close probably a third of the universities and have 50% of the high school kids going into apprenticeships. So probably the universities would put a contract out on me probably.
What kind of industries do we really see that have their manufacturing overseas as opposed to in the US?
That have it overseas? Well, a broad range. And we look at both a company, say, shutting down somewhere else and building a factory here, but also at a company that has been, let's say, buying a machine part somewhere else and then buying the machine part here. That's equally reshoring, even though it's outsourced instead of in-house. Okay. Otherwise, your MTI members wouldn't be getting much action out of it. Okay?
Right.
So or not as much anyway. Anyway, traditionally, the work that has been offshored is predominantly a combination of labor intensive, because the lower labor rate is what drove it offshore. Right. Subject to foreign government incentives of various kinds, like the Chinese have done for the chips and the EV batteries and things like that. So solar, rare earth minerals, so on. Things that make sense in terms of freight. Like, you don't want to ship big bulky things that fill up a ship and don't have much labor involved in them, because you can't save enough on the labor to make up for the freight costs. Right.
Mm-hmm. Is that the chief? Is that the big gorilla? The labor cost? I mean, is that the number one reason everything what goes over there goes over there?
Well, what goes over there because of price. So the FOB, or free on board price, or ex works price, a comparison of that to the same here. And our data that I'll show you in a bit shows that in fact, why don't you pull it up now? Pull up the first slide.
Let me share my screen here.
And what this is going to show you is we have something called the TCO estimator. So companies come on and use it to compare.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
To compare the buying from offshore or making offshore versus here. And I took the first 190 cases where the users had compared China to the US, China being obviously the big 800-pound gorilla in all this. The horizontal axis is China as a percentage of the US. The blue line is price, so ex works price, FOB price, something like that. And you can see the peak of the distribution is around 70%. So on average, that the product, this could be t-shirts, it could be nuclear reactors, anywhere in between. But on average, 70% of the US price. So that's a big difference. But when they switched over to total cost of ownership, which includes duty and freight and carrying cost of inventory and intellectual property risk and things like that, you shift to the red curve. Now the peak goes up to 85%. And if there was a 15% Section 301 tariff, the Trump tariffs, goes up to about 100%. And the key thing is the numbers in the lower right-hand corner. So based on price, the US wins 8% of the time, based on total cost 32%. And if there's a tariff in place, then 46 or 50%. So huge differences, cheaper overall on price, way cheaper. But if they do the math correctly, and that's our main objective, get them to do the math correctly, we'll see that 20-30% of what they're getting offshore, they can bring back in, not have to raise their price to their customer, and be equally or more profitable.
So what I'm hearing is there are potentially some industries that are sending stuff overseas that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when they send the PO and it gets shipped over and it goes out the door to the customer, they really haven't, some may have even lost money.
They didn't make as much as they could have if they were buying or producing here. And even more so, their risk goes down when they do it here. So one of the driving forces right now is geopolitical risk. So I've got a survey from Chief Executive Magazine taken maybe 6 months ago and asked companies, what's the major factor driving you to reshore? And by far the number one item was geopolitical risk, was a concern, because they've seen what happened in Israel, Hamas in the Red Sea, in the Ukraine, and now the big thing hanging over everything, because all those are sort of small potatoes, because that's not where we get stuff from.
Right.
But Taiwan and China.
Yeah, that could be a biggie.
If something serious happens, and any day it could happen, and China has said, and Xi has said he will resolve this during his term, and the U.S. I've had several U.S. generals say, we believe they're going to do it by 2027, and if it happens, nothing's coming out of China, nothing's coming out of Taiwan. Maybe some of the other neighboring countries, they won't be able to get stuff out past the blockades and the missiles and the landmines, and so we tell companies they should be considering that that's possible, not probable any given year, but certainly possible and likely over a 5 or 10 year period. And what will happen to them if it happens? So for many companies, they're getting so much from those areas that the company would go out of business if they couldn't get that product. Because what they're going to do is, say that happens and nothing's coming, nothing's going to come for 6 months or a year or 5 years. They're going to call shops like your members and their customers, the machine shops, the forgings, and so on, and say, hey, I need some of those products you've been trying to make for me for 10 years, and I need them, and I need them real quick. How soon till you can make me 100,000 of those? And the shop's can say, well, about 5 years, because the war started yesterday, and you're the thousandth call I've had today from people that now need parts and weren't smart enough to buy them from me a week ago. Yeah. So I tell companies, look, but there's all kinds of articles in the media with senior managers of companies, with heads of big organizations, big consulting firms, saying that companies have gone from worrying about saving pennies on the component to worrying about being sure they have the components, so when they can produce their end product and ship it to their customers and make tens of thousands of dollars of margin on the product. And so that mind shift is happening increasingly, and therefore we believe as long as this China Taiwan situation exists, companies will continue to move the work out of China. Now, it isn't all coming here. Mexico, India, Vietnam, other places. So it's up to U.S. suppliers to be aggressive enough, smart enough to use the TCO calculation to convince the companies, now that the work's in play, to get more than their share of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being a CEO of a company or leadership trying to look at where your supply chain is going to come from. And any day you could wake up and something, war or anything, political element in any country that you're involved with, and you have no backup plan. I mean, is that kind of the big thing? I mean, something happens and it just totally yanks the supply chain out and they have no backup plan. That's danger zone, right?
Well, I think many of them have some kind of a plan, but like there's a lot of talk about China plus one. So you'll have a supplier of that product in China, and maybe an equivalent supplier in India or Mexico or Czechoslovakia or somewhere. But if you lose the 50% or the 70% of the product that was China, and everybody else who's getting stuff out of China loses it at the same time, which puts all the more demand on all your other supplier, are you going to be able to get the amount that you need to ship your end product? And the answer is no, because China is the factory for the world.
So we got a great question here from one of our members, Glenn, in California. So he asked, what does our government need to do outside of tariffs to reshore work? Other governments are actually wooing manufacturing and supply chains to their country. So what is our government? What do you think our government needs to tap into?
Well, we have actually have a plan. We call it the competitiveness toolkit. So we put together a list of 10 actions or so that the government could take and estimated how many jobs would come back if they did each of those actions. So if you want details, thanks for asking the question, but if you want details, go to our website, reshorenow.org, type in at the top competitiveness toolkit. It'll take you to the blog. You'll be able to see in detail what we said. But in summary, always our number one answer is skilled workforce. Because I want us to increase manufacturing by 40%, and you don't have enough workers now to you can just barely hang on with what you need to get done now. And if I asked every factory in the country to increase by 40%, you'd raise your hand and say it's impossible. So we need 30-40% more workers, and we need better workers. We need smarter kids, better trained. And so my number one thing is change the education system from college for everybody or university for everybody to instead being a good career for everybody, and tell them about the benefits of working in the heat treating industry and the machining industry. And so the number one is skilled workforce, and we have all kinds of details we've advocated to the government to get them to be not so biased in favor of universities. Second, the simplest thing to do, although hard to convince people to do, is reduce the value of the US dollar. So the US dollar is overvalued, most people agree, by 20 or 30%. And as a result, this is a great place to be a bank. Everybody outside the country stores their money here because we're the safe haven place, but that makes us too expensive to be a factory. And if we can get the dollar down by 20 or 30%, there's a methodology called the market access charge. So you can look that up. It's developed by a Dr. John Anson.
Right.
It has a methodology for doing that. We're in favor of it. And one of the two benefits of getting the dollar down. First, your heat treating services compared to China, India, Germany are 20% less expensive than they are now. That's wonderful. That's going to bring work back. But second, one reason it used to be, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, manufacturing wages were substantially higher than service wages. And now they're not as, if there's like this advantage before, it's coming down to here. And one of the reasons is there's a limit to how much you can pay because you're competing with Mexico, China, India, and so on. Whereas the McDonald's and Burger King are competing with each other because you can't import a burger from China. Okay, so if you can get the dollar down, then you can raise your wages relative to the service wages and still be competitive with offshore. And now you can attract more and better people like you used to be able to do, say, 20 or 30 years ago. So you get both, you're more competitive now, and you get the kind of competitive in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the demographics of it works out, because China, because of the One Child per Family Act years and decades ago, is going, I mean, their population of workers is going to dramatically decrease over the next 10 to 15 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays into the whole workforce thing in China, because that's where a lot of the manufacturing is.
It's actually, their population peaked about a year ago, and now they're smaller population than India. And I saw one chart that showed if the demographics continue the way they are now, that maybe at the end of the century, the US will have more population than China instead of having about a fourth as many that we have right now.
Right.
But I've also seen a report that came out of China saying that by either 2025 or 2030, I can't remember which, China expects to have a shortage of 30 million manufacturing workers.
Right.
30 million manufacturing workers shortfall. And part of the problem is that China has sent so many of their kids to university, and the kids come out, and because their economy is soft, they cannot find a good university kind of job, and they refuse to take the factory job that their parents were happy to take. And so they're doing something called lying flat. So you go back to your parents' apartment and you sleep on the couch all day.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the world of manufacturing in the U.S., right? I mean, you got a lot of next generation workers who are coming out and they don't want to go in the family business, but they don't want to go into manufacturing because of the perception of what it used to be before technology hit the scene.
Yeah,
So
and technology is awfully important. I think if you can get, most kids like computers, they like technology. If you've got good technology in your shop, if you got AI, coming in, you're going to do AI to somehow make the company better. You got something to talk to the kids about. I've been very active in my life in the machine tool industry, and so IMTS, which is the 115,000 person machine tool show in Chicago this year, we have something called I think it's this skilled workforce summit or something like that. And 15,000 high school and community college kids are brought in, bussed in from like up to 100 miles away to see the CNC machines, the robots, how cool the industry is. And that makes it a lot easier to recruit them into the industry.
right. So well, an MTI at our trade show I just mentioned in Furnace of North America in Columbus, we're going to happen to be in the town with one of the largest material science and engineering schools with Ohio State University. And we're working with their engineering and material sciences department to see what we can do to attract all those young kids and great bachelor's degrees and secondary school to come to the show and see what it's about, see all the latest technology, because they'll definitely love what they see.
Since you mentioned Ohio State, there's a professor there called John Gray. He's in the business school, and we've worked together on a couple of things. But he did a study on reshoring. He found 4 companies, mid-sized companies, more or less like your members, maybe up to 500 people, something like that employment, and 4 companies that had offshored and then reshored. And he asked them, why did you offshore? He said, well, the wages were so much lower, the price was so much lower, they were so enthusiastic, and I couldn't afford not to go. So you sent the work off. Well, then why did you reshore? Well, over a couple of years, we had problems with quality and delivery and too much inventory and midnight telephone calls. So we were both awake at the same time, and travel. And you put all that irritation together, plus the duty and the freight, and all the obvious stuff. You put all that together, and it wasn't worth it, so we brought it back. So I call it sort of a gradual understanding of total cost of ownership that convinced them to bring the work back. So nice paper by John Gray. If anybody's interested, contact me at harry.moser@reshorenow.org, and I'll send you a copy to read.
Well, it's interesting you talked about quality. I mean, what I think about is you got a big ship worth of freight of all your stuff coming over here, and you get that freight and it's got bad parts in it. And by the time you recognize it, they've already got another freight ship on the way with the same bad parts. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, another one on the way, and with perhaps the same bad parts or perhaps good parts, and you don't know, and there's no way to get to the container to find out. So you've got to decide then, should I wait and see if the ones in the second container are any good? Should I try and rework them? should I fly over to the factory and make sure they're making good parts and then air freight them in at a cost that wipes out all my profit on the whole deal? And whereas if they're getting it from a local guy 50 miles, 100, 500 miles away, you drive over there, you beat them on the head, and you got some good parts coming out maybe in 3 or 4 days, and you know they're good parts. So all kinds of differences in certainty, in confidence by having local.
So, we're about 2.5 years removed from COVID. So I'm interested to know, after we've had that much time from it, what was learned, what's going on differently before COVID to after COVID and relative to the offshoring and onshoring, reshoring of goods.
Yeah, so before COVID, it was more or less like I described with Professor Gray, that just the accumulation of all this irritation, all these little nicks and cuts kind of thing that added up together wasn't worth it. But starting with COVID, it's disruptions. And so a serious experience of what? Things being a month late, maybe a month and a half late, ships piled up on outside LA. So problem with medium disruption, but you had COVID, and then you had the Suez Canal, and then Ukraine, Russia, and now Israel, Hamas. But every hanging over this China thing, and so people they've had the real experience of losing a month or a month and a half, and then now they can imagine losing a year or 2 years worth of delivery, and now they're serious about it, and they don't think it's going to go away. Most analysts say that international crises are unfortunately going to keep happening bigger and more. And so if you're sitting there looking at that and you say, well, could we have a crisis in the U.S.? I mean, some people think we're going to have civil war in the United States, but certainly no more likely than anywhere else. But if you have all your stuff coming from the U.S., then the only event that can hurt you is if something goes wrong with the U.S.
Sure.
Whereas if you have it coming from 10 countries all over the world, including China and Russia, Ukraine, whatever, then there's 10 places where things could go wrong, and any one of them going wrong puts you out of business. So you might as well put I always say, put all your eggs in one basket and take damn good care of the basket.
Well, you know what you get to do when you've got all your stuff being manufactured in the U.S., right? You can sleep at night. You don't go to bed worrying about that 2 a.m. call that Civil War just broke out in XYZ company where you're manufacturing your goods. I mean, you get to sleep at night.
Yeah, but you don't have the problem of risk or worry keeping you up. But you also don't have like I said, the midnight telephone call when they're at work, so you can talk to them and resolve the problems that you already have that you're trying to put out.
So a lot of our members talk to Fortune 500 companies. They're doing business with them. They're doing business with companies that are doing a lot of product overseas. So what does your organization do when you sit down with an organization and are trying to help them understand the process of why they should have goods and services being manufactured here versus overseas, so they understand what that process is. So if they're talking to any, they can mention it to them.
Yeah, several of our sponsors are big machine tool companies. We're honored to have their support, and I've been training their salesmen on what to do. So sort of the same situation. And I say, do you like the end of the year, do you go in and meet with them and ask them what's in their budget for next year? And they say, yeah, we talk about that. And do you get anywhere? Well, sometimes, for a lot of the times, they say, well, I'll call you if I need you, kind of thing. And then I urge them to say something like, are you getting much in the way of components out of China or Taiwan? And they say, yeah. What would happen if you couldn't get those? And if everything went to hell over there and everybody here was loaded, it'd be a real problem. Well, are you thinking about bringing some of that back? We could help you. We could provide you the machines to do it. We could find you local suppliers who could buy our machines and make those parts for you. And I've done this calculation using our total cost of ownership estimator that'll show you that even though the factory price here might be 20% higher, the total cost when you have takeout duty and freight and all that other stuff is actually going to be lower. So you'll be more profitable and you'll be able to sleep at night. So I would encourage your listeners to when they're selling, when they're especially a general discussion, somebody they know, to go into that risk situation and explore, gently. You don't want to be a rabble rouser, but gently with the company. Are you thinking about this? What can we all do together to make life more secure for you? And then use our TCO estimator to do the calculation. It's free online on the website. You have to go there, sign up, sign in, and use it. And there's examples and instructions and all kinds of things like that. We've got a revision. I was working on it this morning, actually, with I have a team of University of Michigan graduate students, interns. They're helping us, and we're revising it to be able to put in ESG, so like environmental, so a calculator where the company will define it, say what its product is, and then we'll tell them approximately how much environmental reduction, like emissions reduction, will happen when they make it here instead of making it there and shipping it here. Because most companies say they care about the ESG. It'll also have the Trump tariffs in, and it'll have the geopolitical risk built into it. So get them to think about total cost. If you're looking for customers to sell to, look at our import substitution program, which can, if you say if you're a key service in making some kind of widget, get together with the contract manufacturer or whatever that makes the widgets, a machine shop, forge, whatever, and you can use our system to identify the biggest importers of widgets, and then go to them and convince them to reshore, and you tied up with the machine shop, forge shops, whatever, make the parts for them instead of them importing. So a couple of things like that could be done to either convince them to do it, or find the right people to convince to do it.
Right. So one of our, you mentioned earlier that, China's got a depleting workforce and work is leaving there in some capacity, but it's going to other countries. So one of our workers has seen work come back, but he's seen it really earmarked and directed over to Mexico. So any thoughts on how the messaging needs to be to keep it coming to US, or has Mexico just got a competitive advantage?
Well, Mexico clearly does, because the average wage in China is about $7 an hour. And the average wage in Mexico is about $4 an hour. So Mexico is cheaper than China at an equal level of productivity. Generally, they're not as productive as the Chinese. The good thing about Mexico is that it has a lot of US content in its products. So shipping from Mexico to the US on average has about 40% US content. Components, heat treating, whatever that went into it, whereas product from China has about 5%. So when work comes to Mexico, there's a lot of US stuff being shipped down to Mexico to produce those products there. So one way to do it one way to work around it is to get into that supply chain of the products that are working their way back and forth across the border before they finally come up here to be assembled, or maybe as a finished car, what have you. The Mexicans have their own problems. So we have a blog on our website that discusses geopolitical risk, and it describes the issues with Mexico, and they have corruption, and they have infrastructure problems, and they have bribery, and they have all kinds of bad stuff going on. And so anybody who's doing business down there is taking a risk substantially more than the equivalent risk here.
Sure.
And so there has to be enough saving, to make that work out. But they do have low wages and generally an enthusiastic workforce. The people down there have been hungry in the last 20 years, and they're willing to work to not be hungry.
Right. So I noticed on a couple of I perused your website, and I noticed a couple of cool programs, it looks like, in your world on reshoring, that's called the Import Substitution Program and the Supply Chain Gap Program. What are those two programs all about?
Well, I referred to the Import Substitution Program briefly a couple minutes ago. That's the ISP, Import Substitution Program. That's where if a company identifies a product that they're really good at making, we can tell them who the biggest importers are of those products.
Got it.
Okay, and then here's that company. We cannot tell you the buyer. We cannot say, here's the guy who buys the heat treating, but we can say, here's a company and an address, and then you've got to find the buyer, and get in and talk to. Again, it's easier if you're a machine shop or a forge shop, because you're the one that's directly selling to most of these people, whereas more of your members, I think, are selling to component makers
Mhm.
rather than to General Motors, right?
I mean, they're heat treating the gears, they're heat treating the parts that are in many of the cars. So they're working
Yeah.
directly with the Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, but generally with tier one, tier two, yeah, but generally the people who would be importing are going to be those tier one, tier two, tier three to bring in
Correct.
components in. But you'd have to find some of them that are importing products that are heavily heat treated, and then convince them to produce here. Now, because now you've got to convince them not just to heat treat here, but to also produce here. It's simpler for a machine shop or a foundry, because
Right.
they're selling the end, sort of the end product, where you're
Sure.
providing a service to them. But I think it's a question of teaming up with your favorite machine shop, your favorite foundry, your favorite Ford shop, the ones that you've done good work with. You got to, and then as a team, go out to convince the big companies and convince the importers to shift the production back to here.
Right. So one last big question. So when you look at where we've been the last 5 to 10 years, you look at the trends and you look at the next, our economic team at ITR Economics is predicting 24 is going to be somewhat of a slow year, and they're predicting growth years in 25, 6, 7, 8, 9 up to the rest of this decade. So with that potential, what do you look at the trends for reshoring, and how excited are you, or what's your outlook?
First, why don't let me show you the trend in the past, and then we can build on that. So go down to slide 3. And this is a chart that shows.
Can you see that?
No, not yet. You still have chart 1 up there.
Let me
I think
me
I'm not seeing it on the screen. Maybe you're not sharing your screen. There we go. Okay, so this is a chart that shows the total of reshoring, which is done by US companies, think General Motors, and FDI, foreign direct investment, foreign companies, think Toyota or Siemens, somebody like that. And its number of jobs announced per year, and starts in 2010 with 6,000 jobs, peaks in 2017 with the Trump tax and regulatory cuts, about 190,000, falls off with the trade war, business uncertainty, and then picks up with COVID, and then especially into the chips and the EV batteries and solar and all these things that Biden's been putting hundreds of billions of dollars into. And so you can see what we've done. We've done, incredible. Nobody ever thought we'd get, I don't know, a fifth of the way that we've gotten, from 6,000 a year to 350,000 a year. So what's going to happen in the future? Maybe a half of the amount of jobs in the last years has been government funded, chips, EV batteries, and so on. I think they're going to run out of money, and the companies are going to run out of money. And we're certainly running out of workers, and to build the factories and to man the factories. So I think realistically, if we could do 250,000 jobs a year for the next couple of years, I'd be delighted. But 250 is 2% of existing manufacturing employment. That'd be beautiful to have it as an increase every year. And the only way I can see us doing much better than that is if the government gets serious about industrial policy. And instead, right now, they try to pick winners. They're going to pick certain chip companies, certain EV battery companies, and give them tens of billions of dollars. And some of that's going to fail. And instead, they should pick industry for industrial policy. And they should make the US the most competitive place to make most things, and then let the marketplace decide which products, which industries, which companies succeed. And so instead of handing people tens of billions, some of which we will regret, they should be fixing the workforce issue. So we have the quantity and quality of people. They should be getting the dollar down. In taxes, bring back 100% immediate expensing of capital investments, the R&D tax credit, keep our corporate income tax rate relatively low. I think there is a valid argument for tariffs. Almost every other country has a value-added tax. They've shifted their taxes away from their companies because they want companies to be there, and they put them onto the consumer.
Right.
And so they charge 15% on imports, and they subsidize exports. They subsidize by about 15%. Excuse me again, and we don't do that. And so I think there's a good case to be made for a value-added tax. And if you don't do the value-added tax, then instead, Trump has recommended a 10 or 12% across the board tariff. And the tariffs that he put in, for example, on steel, were great for the steel industry, Nucor,
Right.
But they were tough on the machine shops and the Ford shops because the price of steel here is 10-20% higher than it is in competitor countries. So now you got an uphill battle. So if you're going to tariff the steel, then you should tariff the parts and
Right.
and if you do it on everything, then I think it'd be better than doing it on a few things. So it's sort of a choice: tariffs or get the dollar down. Given a choice, I'd get the dollar down because I think it's simpler. But if you're not willing to get the dollar down, then I do the tariffs.
Well, that's all great stuff, Aaron. I appreciate you being with us today. Any last words of wisdom to the listeners out there that are listening in now, and we'll look at this in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, again, I'd recommend that your members promote reshoring to your customers. You can say, I heard this crazy guy talking about it, and what are you doing about it? Mention it on your websites. I've got maybe a dozen companies I know, contract manufacturers, that say worried about your offshore suppliers, concerned about quick delivery, worried about intellectual property, what have you. We can handle all those things for you with really quick. We can enable you to keep doing just in time because we can deliver so fast that you can keep your inventories down. And when you have an interest, say you and another company may be talking to a customer, and there's some serious interest, contact me, Harry, harry.moser@reshorenow.org. Email me, say, Harry, I got a live one. I got someone who's interested to help, and I'd be delighted to help. And then once we find a couple of good cases, let me know, let Tom know. We can write it up. We can do an article on it. One thing you can do is we have a National Metalworking Reshoring Award, and you're not machining, but you're still working metal.
Right.
And so since I'm in charge of it, I would qualify you for it. So if we could find one of you that's picked up a lot of work or part of a bigger project with a machine shop or whatever or a big company that's done reshoring, you're eligible for the award. And you can find it on our website on the slider in the main homepage, and left of one of you win.
Awesome, Harry. Well, thank you. So a couple of things, members. So remember, his website is what is it?
Reshorenow.org.
Reshorenow.org, and you can contact him at harry.moser.reshorenow.org.
At harry.moser@reshorenow.org.
Correct. So go to the website, check it out, and I'm sure he's got some great resources. Harry makes a great point for you. You're the connection to your customer to really influence them to do those things. So we appreciate Harry. Thank you for being here. Members, don't miss the next episode of our live webcast where we're going to be talking about the next heat treat sales forecast on February 28th with ITR Economics. They're predicting 24 to be a flat year, if not lose, and then 25, 26 on is going to be pretty good. So you don't want to miss that. The economy is dynamic and it could shift at any moment. So you want to be on those webcasts, and you can go to heattreat.net. That's heattreat.net, and scroll down to our upcoming events, and you can see all the latest events and meetings that we're hosting. So thank you, Harry, for being here. Members, thank you for tuning in. And remember, you're not just strong, you're MTI strong. We're here for you anytime you need anything. Call us anytime.
Bye, Tom. Bye, listeners.